Restorative Yoga. So we are going to start out our practice today with a reclining butterfly. So I'm going to build kind of a little slope with some pillows. I have two blankets. I have two rather large pillows, like couch cushion sized or rolled up quilt sized pillows. I have some yoga blocks, but anything that will kind of act as a surface that you can rest an elbow on or that you can put underneath pillows will work. So I'm going to take one yoga block, and like this could be a book or something like that. I'm going to put a pillow down the length of that. Now if your pillow's really, this is a really thick and firm pillow, so like a couch cushion or a couple of throw pillows might work, and then kind of wrap a blanket around them so that it's a little bit sturdy, or you can roll up a quilt or just a thick blanket and put that, once it's rolled up, it'll be pretty sturdy. You can put that down the length. So I want to make sure that when I lay over this, my elbows touch the ground, and if they don't, then you might need a little extra something to put under your elbows. And then I'm going to put a little support underneath my knees. So I'm going to use a blanket in that same way. So taking a blanket and rolling it up. Okay. And then I'm going to recline onto this, and so my back's going to go, and I'm going to put my butterfly feet over this, and the blanket will go kind of underneath the knees. So you could easily use two little throw pillows or something like that for your knees. All right, so getting yourself into position. Some people will like, oops, hold on. Some people will like having another pillow here for the head, or another blanket, so that there's a little bit more elevation. It will depend a little bit on how your setup goes. Okay, so both my elbows are resting on the floor, so I'm pretty good here. All of the bones of my legs have some support that they're resting on. If your low back is cranky, the first thing to start with is just see if you can sort of readjust the pelvis so that it's not, the low back isn't being overly arched. It might just be a matter of shifting the pelvis, and if that doesn't work, a little towel or a small blanket fit kind of into that lower back might be just the ticket. Now we're going to stay with this pose for about 10 minutes, so it's worth the time to get it all set up just right. And if for any reason the air conditioning at your house is chilly, you can also cover with a blanket. Once you've gotten your props just right, you've allowed yourself to settle in, the first kind of layer of tension maybe comes off the body, just letting ourselves rest. But sometimes there's layers of tension that we hold in the muscle that we don't even realize we're holding. And that's what this practice is really designed to sort of illuminate and help us relax or release. So as I'm hanging out in a pose, as I'm breathing and noticing the breath, I'm also just trying to pay attention to anywhere, like for me, the jaw is a spot, or the eyes, where I might kind of crinkle around my eyes, so that muscles in the face, let those muscles relax. And then you might check in with the shoulders and make sure I'm not holding a little bit of residual tension there. And similarly with the legs, sometimes with a pose like this, if we're not supported enough, you'll feel your inner thigh muscles kind of gripping to help hold the pose. So fill in the gaps enough that you can actually feel all of those muscles really let go. And it might be that it will happen in stages. So for me, like the first couple of minutes is one relaxation stage, and then somewhere kind of after 3 minutes, there's another layer that kind of relaxes, and then after a while, another layer relaxes. So that's what we're after. I want to try to just become cognizant of how we hold stress in our bodies and just let it go as best we can. And that might mean adjusting your pose, so don't be afraid to do that and then come back to a kind of stillness. Feeling extra fidgety, you can also lengthen out your exhales. So you take a little more time, almost sort of luxuriating in the exhale. So you don't want to make yourself breathless. Just lingering the exhale can help us relax. Some days the mind is a little busier, some days the mind is a little sleepy. It's not such a big deal for it to be sleepy, but if I want to stay alert, I could also let my eyes stay open just a little titch. Or let myself leave my eyes all the way open if the light's not too bright. And that will often help. I find a little extra, or just a little place where I'm holding on in the strangest places. So again, I was just finding a little bit of tension in my thumb joint. So just gently readjusting my hands to let the thumbs relax. I imagine that there are people on the planet who don't ever carry tension in their bodies. Never create, stress never becomes physical. But, it's not true for me. So this practice of really deeply trying to relax is a great way for me to sort of reset my my internal barometer. whatever that functional mechanism is that makes me want to hold tension in my muscles when life is a little stressful. Or it doesn't really have to be a little stressful at all. It could just be life. It's so habitual at this point. So we're just going to stay for a couple more minutes. And so again, just let yourself assess, can I soften any more? Let yourself embrace this moment. Feel the sensation of the, floor or the mat or whatever you're resting on kind of gently holding you. So your body can relax and get heavy into it. Kind of gently bring ourselves around here. So because we've hung out in this shape for a really long time, we don't want to jump out of it. We're going to take our time, try to maintain as much of this relaxed state as possible. So I'm going to just straighten out both my legs to start with. And just that change, I'm going to let that integrate. And in a few moments I will kind of roll over to one side and get all of this stuff that's under my back out. But first, now we're going to come back onto our back because we're going to do a twist, laying on our back. And you might still need some of the props to set those off where you can reach them. All right. do the twist just yet because there's an experience that I'm having of coming off of all of that support that was underneath my back, where it sort of feels like my back is widening out on the floor like a puddle, and it's very pleasant. So I'm just gonna kind of let the tissue of my back, right, adjust from having been propped up on the pillows onto this new shape against the floor. And then I'm going to do a little bit of movement. So I like a really relaxed movement. There are lots of approaches to restorative yoga. My approach is to stay as relaxed as possible. So I don't do a lot of really big things, but what we are going to do for our shoulders while we're kind of here, outside of this little shaky thing that I drew with my arms, is we're going to do a little movement pattern that's fairly straightforward. We're just going to bring the arms over our head. Oh, I got to go down a little bit more. We're going to bring the arms up over our head. Now, if you have a rotator cuff injury, sometimes the arm will want to stop somewhere about, I don't know, 45 degrees or so from the floor. I'm not getting out any kind of measuring devices, but in any case, so if you need to just stop somewhere else, right? You can stop there. You don't have to stop all the way up here at the floor. But the range of motion, like I can move my arm through that range of motion because there are muscles attached to it. But what I'm gonna do instead of just move the arm is I'm gonna actually try to really engage the whole upper back, okay? So I'm gonna reach my arm. I'm gonna do this with both arms at the same time, but I'm using this hand to kind of demonstrate. So when I reach down, my shoulder depresses rather than letting the shoulder kind of have a relaxed position. So I'm going to reach down, the shoulder's going to go with me. As I change the arm, I'm going to let the shoulder come with me. So now the shoulder blade's all the way off the floor. And as I bring the arm overhead, my shoulder blade will move up toward my ear, right? And then coming back, same idea. So at each point along the way, just making sure I'm stretching into that so that I'm integrating more of the upper back. And just having done one of those now, both my arms feel a little different. So, so I'm integrating the upper back into this movement and getting a little bit more muscle action so that hopefully doing this movement pattern will help them relax a little bit more as we do the twist. So reaching down, and again, really trying to let the whole upper back and chest even become a part of this movement pattern. So it's not just the arm bone, but it's also the shoulder blades and the collarbones. And we're kind of moving along with us here. And again, stop. If you have an injury, stop where it feels like you should. Come back to just pointing straight up. And then I'm going to grab my right upper arm with my left hand, and I'm going to pull my arm across so that my shoulder comes off the floor. And then I'm going to use all the muscles in my upper back to try to pull my shoulder blade back to neutral while I'm still trying to pull it off the floor with this left hand. So it doesn't look like much is happening, but there's a lot of action. The muscle is working very hard to try to stabilize itself against this resistance that I'm applying with my left hand. 2 more breaths here. All right, so I'm gonna let go of that arm, grab the other arm, pull that guy across, and then secure that shoulder blade back. And again, same idea where I'm kind of pulling the arm and really trying to get that shoulder blade back. So right now it's a lot of work, and this is sort of working on a similar principle to this. I don't know if you've ever done these relaxations where people get you tense your muscles up really, really tight and then let them go. Similar idea. We're trying to get this muscle really, really tight, like really, really engaged. 2 more breaths here. And then hopefully when we get to our twist, we're gonna let that go. The shoulders will want to stay a little more relaxed, a little more, the word melted is the word that's coming to mind, but that may not work for everyone. So, but really allow the shoulders and the upper back to stay put. So we're going to fill in the gaps with props so that the shoulders and the upper back will stay really relaxed. So right now I'm just sort of memorizing the feeling of both of my shoulders heavily relaxing into the floor. And then when I get myself into the twist, I'm going to add all the props I need to keep that like that. So if I just bring my legs over to the side, because of tension in my outer hip or the way my spine is shaped, my left shoulder is lifted off the floor. So this is what I'm trying to get at. So I'm going to put a pillow in here and bring my legs around and see if that, and that's pretty close. So I'm going to fill in the gaps with the pillow, and then I'm going to take a little bit of a blanket. Well, it's not a little bit, this is quite a blanket, but I'm going to put a blanket in between my two shin bones so that my leg will be really warm, but it gives me just a little extra support there. So now my upper back feels very heavy and neutral on the floor, and that's what I'm after for today. Now I'm going to turn my head in the same direction as my legs to start with. I may decide to go back to neutral with that. You can also turn your head the opposite way if your neck is up for it. Okay, so we're going to stay with this pose for about 4 or 5 minutes now. Point, if you need to, you can put like a pillow or a blanket, a really thin pillow or a blanket under your whole upper back. And if you want to have a little more softness to relax the upper back into, you can certainly do that. And I was, noticing I was carrying a little bit of tension around my legs, so I'm trying to relax really deeply there as well. Relax the abdominal muscles. If there's any sort of numbness or tingling at all in your shoulder or your arm, or you can reposition the arm bone. There's some nerves in the shoulder that may get accidentally sort of compressed, so just adjusting the arm bone can be helpful there. I'm just sort of giving myself a chance to let go layer by layer. As soon as we've adjusted the body into these different shapes, there's little layers of tension that can come back. Even though the last pose I got really relaxed in, and maybe this one I have to do with I have to do all that little, layer by layer by layer adjustment again. And so the new shape itself may sort of evoke the body, or create a situation where the body wants to hold on. So this 2-minute in mark is a really nice kind of beginning of that first layer of everything relaxing. So we'll probably have one more after this, but see if you can't just metaphorically ease the seat back a little notch more. Just gonna stay for a little bit longer. Just a wee bit more. Nice place to kind of shift, begin the shift is to notice the breath again. Now I'm just going to turn my head back to neutral and pause there to start with. Bring my arms in just a little tighter so that there's a little more support, because I'm going to try to let my legs stay as relaxed as possible as I just sort of slither, roll back to the center. I'm not going to go anywhere right away, but I'm going to kind of stretch out like a little bit like a starfish and just see what happened. So quite often with a pose like this that's asymmetrical, like the body is doing something that's more to one side than the other, there is a sort of sense that one side is very different than the other. So the sense I have of my left side is that like the leg is longer, the arm is longer, it's a little closer to the ground. Feels like this hip bone is smaller or shorter than this hip bone. It's not. If I put my hand there, it's exactly the same. But the sensation is one of it relaxing. And that just all by itself is kind of nice to marinate in. And then I'm going to add a little bit of movement, and this is just going to be kind of those just little back and forth, slightly jiggly. Nothing particularly challenging movement pattern. Now, if you want to do more, you certainly can. Give myself a really tall stretch. Now, what I'm waiting for before I do the second side is a sense that my body has eased back into a more neutral position. So when I first come out of a pose, there are some interesting sensations, but there's not a sense of like, not a sense of ease necessarily. It feels a little weird. So this, a little unusual. This moment right here, though, feels very much at ease. There's a kind of neutral situation. I feel still a little bit of difference between the sides, but much less so. So now is a good time for me to go ahead and add on or do the other side, right? So I'm gonna bring myself into the twist on this side. And I know this side's a little tighter for my shoulder, so I'm just adding a little bit more support under this top leg, so it doesn't pull quite as much. All right, so I'm trying to get that sense of my right upper back being right upper shoulder blade, upper back, arm, the whole thing being as heavy and as relaxed as the left side. I'm just pretty close there. I'm gonna let myself relax and fiddle with the legs just a little bit until it gets just right. And a slightly different angle, I think. Okay. And sometimes it does take several fiddlings. Quite a bit of adjustment for me to get the props just right so that I can really feel that sense of my legs relaxing. So then we're going to stay, again, for a few minutes. It is just a little bit more challenging for me to completely soften into. So I'm using my breath to help me with that. So again, kind of lingering on those exhales and seeing if each time I exhale, I can soften a little bit more. longer. And again, we're just going to transition by noticing the breath again. Back to the center. And I'm gonna slowly let my legs come back. Kind of hovering in the in the sensations left behind by the pose. And there's definitely a more sense of symmetry, although it's still, you know, a little unusual. All the tissue is returning. Whatever, like even super mild with the props, you know, the stress that's on my body is super mild, but there's still a little bit. So I can feel the muscle shifting. Now we're gonna come to a seated position. We'll do our seated forward bending pose. Oh. So take your time sitting up, but when you're ready. Oh. Oh. So we're gonna do a pose that in the yin world is called caterpillar, and in other yoga worlds is called extreme stretch of the west. Extreme stretch of the backside of the body, basically. But we're not gonna do anything extreme. But everybody's body's a little different. So we're gonna have the legs straight and in front of us, and instead of trying to pull them together and turn the toes up the way you do with the extreme stretch variation, we're gonna leave a little space and we're gonna let the legs relax. Now, for me, there's a little gap right here underneath my knees, so I need to fill that gap in. Again, generally with restorative yoga, if there's a gap, fill it. We may not be able to fill every gap, but we'll try. And then based on how your hips move, some people will feel much more comfortable with an elevated hip. So you might even sit up on a little pillow or another blanket so that the hips are a little elevated. And then you'll bring your pelvis forward. Now, that's about as far as mine goes. So there's a little bit of space here between my chest and the floor, or my arms and the floor. So I'm gonna fill in that space. I'm gonna use pillows to do it. But if that space is pretty great, or you don't have very many pillows, you can also like bring a chair over and lean into a chair. So you're kind of put your arms on the seat of the chair. So you could be creative with the props, or if you have a bed nearby, you can kind of snuggle your legs under the bed and kind of lean into the mattress. So I'm just gonna build myself a little prop mountain out of all these props. I'm trying to fill in as much space as I can, and then the last space that I'll fill in will be just for my forehead. And I try to leave a little gap where my nose is so I can breathe. That's my general intention. And then I can usually find a place, like for me, just snuggling my arms in against my thighs, my elbows rest on my thighs. But if you want the arms to rest somewhere else, you can also rest them up a little higher. Just make sure you like how it lands. And again, with this pose, we're gonna stay a while. So we're gonna get in here and hang out for about 6 or 7 minutes. you know, I'm gonna go with this clock. It might be a little different. If I may not see the end of that time. I will eventually pay attention. I'm gonna try to relax as much as possible. Now, for me, allowing my back to be a little round is not problematic. I don't have any disc issues in my lower back at this time in my life, though that could change. So right now it feels really nice. It's a really lovely stretch. I'm not letting myself get to a place where it feels really intense. I've filled in all this space so that my back is comfortably rounding, right? It's not a shape it holds all the time, so it feels a little unusual. But if your lower back really gives you any trouble, fill in a little bit more so that your torso stays a little more aligned and so the back is not rounding at all. I'm just trying to find the spot where it's the least amount of obvious pressure. I want it to be as relaxed as I can get it. This is that point where quite often, like sort of around the 3-minute or so mark, is where I start to feel a really deep sense of the body starting to really let go. So I thought it was relaxed. And then another layer peels off and I realize it wasn't entirely. So now I'm just checking in and sort of intentionally trying to notice, is there anywhere else I can relax even more? a little bit longer here. Just notice the breath again. I'm going to come out of here with a really big breath. So I'm going to inhale and sort of let that pull me backwards. Again, I'm going to be kind of gentle with unwinding all of this. Just kind of giving myself a chance to really gently, I'm going to move my spine through these little kind of cat critter, just little shapes, just back and forth, kind of hunchy, and a little bit more forward, little cat and cobra kind of shape. Oh, Halloween cat, little broad chest. Eventually, as that kind of smooths out, be ready for the next pose. All right, so you can move it any way that seems appropriate for you. Now we're going to do a little version of the side bend here. Again, I'm going to have a little support under my knees. So I'm going to do a little bit of a turn. So I'm going to turn myself sideways a little bit. One leg is out straight and one leg is going to be bent, and I'm going to fill in the gaps. Might need a longer blanket or another blanket, but that one did pretty good. We'll start with this guy. And then I'm going to sideways bend here. And again, I'm going to kind of fill in the gaps. So with some pillows. And then I'm going to use my hand as a headrest. Now, this arm, you know, normally when this pose is done, this arm would go over your head, and you could certainly stretch it over your head, or you could bring it behind your back, but mostly for this pose, we're gonna want it to relax. So because my elbow's kind of hanging out in space, I might give it a little arm rest. This might be a little much for an arm rest, but I'm gonna see. So just there's a sense that that shoulder is relaxed. I'm mostly here for the spinal movement. Now, because we're doing this as a seated pose and we have 2 sides to go, we're going to do this one the shortest of all the poses we've done. And we'll stay for about 3 minutes. You can turn your head in different arrangements, like slightly more towards the ceiling, slightly more toward the floor, directly to the side. And it might be that you'll find a position in your neck that is more relaxing than another spot. Again, you could do this kind of pulling a chair over and kind of resting onto the chair as well. You'd have to fiddle with it, but you could make it work. This to be just a little extreme, so I'm going to back up just a little bit, just a little less pressure, so that I can again focus mostly on relaxing into this shape and a little less on trying to create a stretch. Taking a restorative approach to a pose that is not always done in that way. We'll stay for one more minute. So we're going to take about 3 more breaths here. Now I'm going to start by just sort of adjusting my head so that that feels like it's kind of neutral in the neck, and then I'm going to let myself come all the way, the rest of the way out of that side bend. Again, I'm going to take a few moments to sort of adjust. Definitely, there's definitely a difference in the way the sides feel, and it still feels like I'm sort of leaning to the side. So that's something to be mindful of. I'm not ready to go to the other side yet. I'm getting myself sort of adjusted. Now, it feels a little bit like this shoulder is lower in relationship to my ear than this side. So we're going to see as I do the second side if that's a result of that pose having kind of released some of the stress or some of the tension that those muscles were holding on to. And again, I wait for that feeling that my body has kind of eased back to a neutral position. So that's what I was waiting for. And if you never find that neutral position, or, well, you'll find it. You may not be aware of it, because I wasn't for a really long time. But when it doesn't feel like you're leaning, you can start doing, or start kind of coming toward your other side. So again, I'm going to kind of fill in the position here under my ribs, and find a comfortable position for my arms. And last time I bent a little, I mean, I'm within my range of motion, but it just felt a lot like there was a little bit more stretch on my side waist than I really wanted. So I'm trying to find that sort of happy, like I can tell that I'm leaning to the side, but I'm not feeling a whole lot of stress and tension on these lower back muscles. I want them to relax more than anything else. And we're working on what the right position for my neck is going to be on the side. And by right, I just mean the most relaxed I can get. Again, we'll stay for about 3 minutes on this side, give or take a few seconds. stay for about another minute. Take some deep breaths here. So I'm going to start by sort of, once again, kind of bringing my neck completely to neutral, and then taking the rest of me out of the side bend. Now, we'll do two more poses. We're going to do a back bendy pose, and we're going to do Shavasana. The back bendy pose that we're going to try today is a supported bridge pose. Now, if that one doesn't work for you, you can certainly substitute like a kind of reclining fish, where you put support under your upper back and let your shoulders rest on the floor, your shoulders and your head. So, we've done that before, if you've been here before. The kind of mountain stream kind of version of the pose. But for the supported bridge pose, you can just put support under the hips. I'm going to put support all the way under my whole back. So my shoulders are going to rest on the floor. And then the kind of curve here is going to be right about where the shoulder blades live. So my shoulder blades will be just on the top edge of this, like the very bottom tip of my shoulder blades will be kind of near the top edge of this bolster, so that the upper part of my shoulders can rest on the floor, and maybe the shoulder blades too. So this will wind up kind of somewhere near the center of my rib cage. So the bottom of the ribs, my lower back, and my hips are all going to rest on this pillow. That for me is a little bit more comfortable. So you can, if you don't have these kinds of pillows, or your couch cushions don't come off, you can kind of put like several things, or a couple of stacks of pillows, or a rolled up quilt down in that same way. Okay, so I'm going to take a blanket, and this blanket has just been folded 3 times, but it's a thin blanket. So if you have a really thick blanket, you might only fold it twice. And my shoulders are going to rest on this blanket, so it won't be such a big drop. And again, I'm kind of smoothing out the blanket to get rid of any lumps, because those, while they may not seem like a problem initially, you will eventually really notice them. I'm going to leave this pillow down at the bottom, because I may want to rest my legs on it, my feet. Okay, so smoothing this out. I'm going to sit on this pillow. Okay. And then I'm going to find the right recline. So here, it's a little too high, because the only thing really resting on the floor is my head. So I'm going to bump just a little bit back. The bottom tip of my shoulder blade is just above the top of this pillow. And my shoulder is easy, like the upper part of my shoulders are resting on the floor, and there's no pressure on my neck, and that's what I'm going for. And I could even go just a notch further, and it's a little bit more heavy and relaxed. So you just have to kind of play, like where's the right spot. And I could leave my legs like this, or I can stretch the legs out. Now this pillow here, you know, again, kind of fills in the gap. So there's a little less pressure on my low back. I want, because of where the tension in my back often lives is in the upper back, I want the emphasis of this back bend to be up here. But for some folks, the lower back might be the better emphasis. So you decide for yourself. So then you could have your feet on the ground and it'll pull on your hip flexors a little bit more. Ooh, I'm getting this, I'm trying to find should the support be more under my calves, a little more under my ankles. It's feeling kind of nice under the calf muscles. All right, so we're gonna hang out here. Now this pose is not gonna be very long. We'll stay for about another 4 minutes, 4 or 5 minutes or so, but enough to get some benefit from the back bend. Now for some people, back bends are super juicy. They're really the best poses. For me, they're a little more challenging. So I have to be a little more attentive to relaxing. And because this is a little bit unusual in terms of the way my body normally hangs out, I may have to just remind myself to let go, relax a few more times than normal. Just started to feel like the deep hip flexor muscles that live way down in there. I just felt those relax a little bit more. So this is kind of what I'm trying to kind of get at, is sometimes muscle, like the deeper layers of muscle, need a little longer to relax. Why the practice is done so slowly and why we hang out for a while. We'll stay for about another minute or so here. I want to transition from this pose into my final relaxation as easily as possible. So I'm gonna just roll over to one side and get the stuff out from underneath my back. I'm gonna keep this pillow, but sort of slide down a little closer to it. I'm gonna keep this blanket, but mostly put it underneath my head. And then again, if it's chilly at your house because of the air conditioning or the time of year, whatever it is, you could cover up with a blanket. It's fairly toasty here today, so I'm feeling pretty good. Once you get everything settled, decide how your arms should go. Then we're just going to let the body relax again. And we want this to be as neutral as possible. It should feel just as easygoing as we can make it. This pose is one that you could stay in for a really long time, 10, 15 minutes, even 20, although it might turn into a nap at that point. But for today, we're just going to stay for a few minutes. But you can always, you know, pause a little longer on your own if you like. Let yourself just once again relax every muscle, even the deep ones. so gently. We're just going to become aware of the breath again. Take a breath so deep you can feel it all the way to your tiptoes. Let it go with a big sigh. One more time, kind of staying as relaxed as possible. We'll transition out of this pose. So starting with some little fingers and toes wiggling. Stretching them out and wiggling them. And then maybe some movement in the wrist and ankles. I like to notice the movement in the muscles in my hands and my feet. They do so much hard work. Just feeling that for a second, and then you can start to stretch and move as you like. Oh, goodness, friends. All right, so I'm going to hang out on my side for a couple breaths. But that pose and the one before it, we spent quite a bit of time in a reclining position. So I'm just going to take a moment, and then I'll sit myself up. You can join me when you're ready. So thanks for hanging out with me for some restorative yoga today. Hopefully you feel relaxed. Ready to ease into the new week. Let's take a nice big breath together. And a deep Enjoy the rest of your day. Welcome. Namaste.